Allen Company, 47 years young and a proud sponsor, wishes OOIDA all the best as you celebrate 50 years.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Reddick.
It's good news, bad news when it comes to the state of the spot market. Andrew King of the OOIDA Foundation stops by to go over what their September report says about conditions out there as we all wait for something to spur positive momentum. Detention time is a real problem in trucking, and detention pay is one way of addressing it. But how do you get detention pay, and what do you do if they won't pay it? I'll discuss that, plus filing on broker bonds, with Tom Crowley and Joe Biggs of OOIDA's Business Services Department. And finally, the stage is set for the second meeting of the Advisory Committee on Underride Protection, and the stakes are high. We'll preview that upcoming meeting. Then it's a recap of the American Trucking and Industry Leader Hall of Fame ceremony for 2023. We speak with the honorees from the event itself. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. Our top story today: the amount of freight hauled across the U.S. border by trucks was up in August. That's according to the latest report out of the Bureau of Transportation Statistics. The Bureau says truck freight valued at nearly $88 billion was hauled across the borders in August. That's an increase of 9.6% from July and an increase of nearly 5% compared to August of 2022. Cross-border freight hauled by trucks across the U.S. northern border rose by nearly 7% compared to the year earlier. At the southern border, the gains were more muted at an increase of nearly 3%. The last time trucking cross-border freight experienced a year-to-year decrease was in February of 2021. The United Auto Workers and Mack Trucks are still far apart in labor negotiations. In a news release Thursday, Mack said the union continues making demands that are, quote, unrealistic. You might remember that the two sides did come to an agreement about a month ago, but it was struck down by UAW members, sending the two sides back to the negotiating table. Only those negotiations are not going well, apparently, meaning the strike that began earlier this month at assembly locations in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Florida continues. No additional talks are on the schedule right now. Mack had agreed to average wage increases of 36% over 5 years, with an average immediate wage increase of nearly 15%. UAW wants bigger increases and better benefits. A confirmed case of bird flu within a commercial turkey flock in Pocahontas County, Iowa, has resulted in the state issuing a disaster proclamation effective immediately. State officials said the case was confirmed by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Under the proclamation, overweight loads up to 90,000 pounds will be allowed to move on non-interstate highways in Pocahontas and Buena Vista counties if responding to the disaster. Motor carriers and drivers assisting in disaster relief efforts are also granted extended hours of service. Drivers are not required to carry a copy of the proclamation, which expires on November 19th in Buena Vista County and November 22nd in Pocahontas County. Additional bird flu outbreaks have been reported in other states as well, like Minnesota, South Dakota, and Utah. But as of right now, there are no emergency proclamations in effect related to trucking in those states. The stretch of I-55 outside of New Orleans that was closed following a deadly pileup crash earlier this week has partially reopened. One lane of southbound I-55 is now getting through. As of Friday, northbound I-55 in the area remained closed with no timetable for lanes to reopen. More than 160 vehicles were involved in Monday morning's crash. 8 people were killed with dozens more injured. Authorities are blaming a so-called super fog for reducing visibility. A truck driver in Canada found themselves in a precarious situation earlier this week. BC Emergency Health Services says the driver was hospitalized following a rollover crash in a roundabout in Langford, British Columbia. No other vehicles were involved. The driver was hurt but is expected to recover. As for a cause, authorities don't believe the trucker was impaired. They say the truck was full of tree stumps and it appears the load shifted as it was going through the roundabout. Forward Air is reconsidering its merger deal with Omni Logistics. In a news release, the company claimed Omni had not complied with certain obligations of the merger agreement related to financing and other matters. Omni disputed that claim in its own news release, but said it's committed to the merger. Forward Air, not as much. In their news release, the company said it doesn't believe the closing conditions noted in the merger agreement will be met by the time of closing, and as such is not obligated to move forward with the deal. The deal, announced in August, was expected to close by the end of this year, forming a $3.8 billion brokerage and LTL service company. In Oklahoma, a truck driver has been awarded $1.6 million after his employer allegedly shorted his check and called him a racial slur. A federal judge this week ordered Ohio-based Hamady to pay up. The dispute dates back to June of last year. That's when Roscoe Gatewood Jr. said he called the fleet manager for the trucking company to discuss a paycheck that was reportedly $3,000 less than it should have been. Gatewood said someone representing himself as the president of the company called back later that day and used a racial slur while threatening him. After that came a text message with more of the same. Gatewood sued for past, present, and future earnings along with punitive damages. Hamady, the company, did not defend itself in court. Earlier this month, a U.S. District Court judge ruled in Gatewood's favor. The Canada Food Inspection Agency is asking for the trucking industry's help guarding against a potential invasive species. The agency is on the lookout for the arrival of the spotted lanternfly. No sightings have been confirmed just yet, but officials think it's just a matter of time. The spotted lanternfly is present in several U.S. states, including some that border Canada. Roadways are a means of travel for the insect, which likes to hitchhike on cars and trucks and trailers. If anyone thinks they've seen a spotted lanternfly in Canada, the Food Inspection Agency asks that they take a picture of it, catch it in a secure container, and immediately contact their local office to report it. Also in Canada, the Ontario Trucking Association is seeking input from truckers who regularly travel on a pair of highways in the province. The Northern Ontario Highway Safety Perception Survey is looking for feedback from drivers who frequently use Highway 11 or Highway 17 in Northern Ontario. The goal of this study is to help inform and develop solutions that will improve highway and truck driver safety in the region. The survey includes 9 questions and is confidential. The deadline to take part is October 31st. Pilot will be offering up some special deals in honor of Veterans Day. From November 10th through the 12th, members of the military and their families can get a free meal valued up to $12 at participating locations. Verification must be done through the My Rewards Plus app. Pilot is also raising money through Veterans Day weekend for the Call of Duty Endowment, which helps unemployed veterans find work. Customers can round up their purchases through November 12th. Pilot has set the fundraising goal for the campaign at $1 million. Meanwhile, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association is gearing up for its annual Truckers for Troops campaign. It runs from November 6th through the 12th this year. Since the program was established in 2007, OOIDA members have donated nearly $800,000 to veterans and veteran organizations through Truckers for Troops to send care packages overseas to active military and to help veterans here at home. Much more on this over the coming days. For more information or to donate to the 2023 campaign, go to ooida.com/truckers-for-troops. And finally, you've seen the memes. Now it's time to see Florida Man in action. UPI reports that the Florida Man Games, based on the headlines-inspired Florida Man meme, are scheduled to kick off February 24th in St. Augustine. Competitive events scheduled for the games include the weaponized pool noodle mud duel, the evading arrest obstacle course, the Category 5 cash grab, the Beer Belly Florida Sumo, and a head-to-head race called a catalytic converter, 2 bikes, and a handful of copper pipes. If you think you've got what it takes, act fast. Registration is open through November 15th. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. Next, we'll discuss the state of the spot market with Andrew King of the OOIDA Foundation. And I'll discuss detention pay with Tom Crowley and Joe Biggs of OOIDA's Business Services Department. We'll be back in just a moment with more news and information. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Attention all truckers, Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I want to talk to you about those dreaded tax problems. I know you want to keep on trucking and not even think about them, but let's face it, they're not going away all on their own. You need professional help. I've been helping truckers put their tax problems in the rearview mirror for years. I can help you too. Call me now for a free consultation at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com. It's like I always say, keep your eyes on the road, I'll keep mine on the IRS. 888-557-4020.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Welcome back to the program. We're nearing the end of the month, which means Andrew King of the OOIDA Foundation is here, ready to tell us how market conditions are looking out there. Andrew, thanks for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
This is all information from September that we're talking about today. We're taking a look at the bigger picture, as we often do here, Andrew, just to remind folks. And let's start with some good news. I think maybe. Spot rates for dry van did tick up in September. Good, yes, but we do have some caveats there. I'm going to let you be the wet blanket, Andrew.
Oh,
but
thank
we'll
you.
start with the good news there, that the rates did pick up a little bit.
Yes, that is true, and which is kind of normal for seasonal patterns. Obviously, as we head into September, there's usually a bump, and then as we head into November, December timeframe, there's another bump. So there's kind of like these two peaks, which is a good thing. So there is some response in this way. Spot rates for vans increased 3 cents per mile month over month to $2.11, and that's including a fuel surcharge. Okay, so that's important to remember. But it's still 34 cents lower than where we were at this time last year. And contract rates also increased, which actually is somewhat of a negative. Mm-hmm. Because as we've talked about here over the last few months, the spread between the two is really important. And so that spread actually increased because of this. Well, actually kind of stayed the same because they both increased by 3 cents per mile. But we need that really to switch so that spot will be above contract. And that's really what changes things. And it's not, obviously it's demand that's driving that, but we really need to see that happen in order for us to say, okay, we're finally into this next cycle.
Yeah, and still a 48-cent gap there between the two in September, I believe.
Yes, correct.
You mentioned the bumps that we see typically in September and around the holidays. Obviously, we are kind of in peak trucking or truck shipping season right now.
Right.
Rates are going to go up, you would think, and you would hope, but probably in a more muted fashion than is normal. I think that's the big takeaway to look at as we look ahead to the months to come here.
Yes, and we do have the ability to look at some of like DAT. They have a forecasting model that shows quite a bit further into advance into 2024, basically a year ahead of where we are now. And what they're forecasting, of course, again, it's just a model, and models don't always, get it right. It's just an idea of what could happen, right? And so it does have for van rates increasing a bit up until the end of the year, which does tend to happen, but it's kind of a slow, not rising very much. And then after what is also a normal seasonal pattern is rates tend to drop in the first quarter.
Yeah.
And so it has rates falling into April of 2024. So that obviously is not great news, but it also is not unexpected, I guess, at where we are right now at this point in things. But again, we'll keep watching it and praying that model's wrong.
And just to underline that too, a good reminder that now we're all in rainy days right now, but when things aren't quite as bad as they will be, then is the time to make sure that you're putting some money away if you can for those rainier days.
Correct.
That are going to be ahead.
And that's a good point, because one thing that analysts have mentioned is some of the capacity issue that we've talked about. It hasn't necessarily fallen off as quickly as people would have expected, which seems strange because rates are so low, costs are so high. You would think that there would be more attrition, but what you just mentioned, I think, is part of the reason why some carriers, small, mid-size, have been able to stay a little bit more in the game besides just being savvy. Some just are really good at what they do, but in general, they were able to make such a big storehouse, I guess. They made such a profit in 2021 and whatnot that they were able to put that away for the rainy days like what you're mentioning. And so, absolutely, that's a good point.
Let's keep going down the list here of van types. We'll look at flatbed now. Also a bit of a bright spot with spot rates ticking up in September, ending 5 months of decline. So good news there.
Good news. It was just up. It was up 1 cent per mile.
Not a big rise,
but hey, it's not going down.
Yeah.
But it is 38 cents lower year over year. And again, contract rates actually ticked up just a little bit, 2 cents. So that increased the spread to 64 cents between contract and spot. Again, that's somewhat of a negative. And looking out for flatbed, kind of the extended forecast predicts that flatbed spot rates, excluding fuel, will dip in November. But then they will pick up, as they normally do, towards the end of the year into the first quarter, second quarter of 2024. So hopefully that one does play out. That could be potentially a bright spot between the three equipment types. But right now, flatbed's really taken some hits. It's been declining for quite some time.
Yeah, one interesting thing, though, looking at the report here is construction spending, right? This is not right now typically the time of year you see construction pick up, but we've got all these infrastructure projects around the country going on, which does seem to be helping things a bit there, right?
Yeah, I would imagine that definitely is helping pull things up, whereas without it, maybe it would fall more drastically. Now, it's a little bit difficult when you look at construction spending from the Census Bureau, mainly because it's not adjusted for inflation. So yes, it's rising upward quite a bit. I mean, if you look at these charts, it's very evident how much higher we are now than where we were before COVID. But how much is that due to inflation? And that ultimately won't help flatbed as much as maybe otherwise. But yes, I agree with you. I think that is helping to put some upward pressure and keeping it from falling too far.
Yeah, I'm trying to be optimistic.
I know
here,
you're really.
I'm trying.
Hey, housing is doing fairly well. I mean, it's still a little muted, but it did jump up in September, and that is a good sign because that really does generate a lot of freight, and so that could be potentially one positive sign in this.
Yeah, but as you kind of alluded to there, more rainy days ahead, probably for flatbed as well here as we enter the kind of the down season. But, we'll see what happens. Let's move on to reefer here. We're seeing, I think, typical seasonal changes there as well, right? Yeah,
so very much like van, they tend to have kind of the two-peak season. Spot rates increased 2 cents to $2.52 per mile, but they are lower, 33 cents lower than they were last year. And contract rates increased by 4 cents a mile to $3. So again, that kind of increases that spread, which is now sitting at 48 cents difference between the two. But that actually is a little bit lower than what it has been, at least according to last year. So that could be some positive movement in the right direction. And of course, fall produce season is like starting basically right now.
Yeah.
It's really taking off. So we'll see what happens in October when we get those kind of numbers. But hopefully that will boost things a little bit for those hauling reefers.
So when we look at the load types one by one, it doesn't paint a pretty picture. When we zoom out and look at the entire picture overall, the freight cycle, also not a great picture that we're looking at here. It's been the same story for months now.
Yeah.
And actually probably, more than a year now, I guess. We're really waiting on capacity to tighten. That's one aspect of this, which is also a sad thing to keep in mind, too, because that means that people are exiting and
Correct.
People are losing their livelihoods for one reason or another. But we were talking earlier, too. That's going to be one part of this. Demand is also going to be another part of it. Can you talk just a bit about what you see there?
Absolutely. That's a great point. Demand is really, really important. I know capacity also affects where rates are. But the biggest driver of freight is by far manufacturing. So 60% of for-hire trucking ton miles are generated by manufacturing. And in fact, I just introduced this new slide. It's page 39 of the report, this new information, new data point that I got actually from our friend Jason Miller, which shows basically industrial production of manufacturing, and it excludes certain parts that have an outside influence on it. So it's like a really good snapshot of where we are right now. And basically, manufacturing has been in a recession since late 2022. And the way that that's typically defined is 2 quarters of decline year over year would show a recession in manufacturing. So that really needs to change. And so what's going to drive the manufacturing change is kind of the big question. Paper manufacturing is something that really helps drive freight in general, and it has dropped off tremendously since the start actually of COVID. And a lot of that probably has to do with less things being shipped. Paper manufacturing includes cardboard, so things like Amazon and packages and what have you. So that's a good sign, indicator that even though consumers are buying things, it's not enough to kind of keep this engine going. And so that's something that we are watching and something that would need to change before this market really flips, because you need to have that demand push up quite a bit in order to drive the rates up.
Yeah, and that's the confusing part about all of this, for me at least, and I'm not an economist by any means, but we see all these signs that inflation apparently, allegedly, is now dropping a little bit, slowly but dropping.
Yeah.
Consumer spending is still pretty high. The unemployment rate is low. So we have all these differing factors in the economy, as we've talked about before, pushing and pulling on other aspects of the economy. Overall, it seems like we're not in as bad a place as we could be.
Correct.
But all those pressures are really weighing down on the freight market, and especially owner-operators out there. And it really is not a great time. There's really no other way to put it than that. One thing I wanted to ask you too, Andrew, is about the OOIDA Foundation's quarterly report, also out. Just kind of your takeaways and Cliff Notes version of what you found out there.
Yeah, so this is something new that we're offering. We just put it out this month, actually. It'll be something that we offer in addition to the monthly report. So the monthly report focuses on, trucking overall, but it really puts emphasis on van and flatbed and reefer, whereas the quarterly report will focus mainly on owner-operators with their own authority, those who are leased on, and company drivers, just giving you some ideas of what those markets are like. Because one thing that we'll mention, and you kind of hit on it a bit, is when things get bad, it's not necessarily a given that people will just leave the industry. They might just change from one model to another model. So it's not uncommon, especially for our members, to switch from being an owner-operator under their own authority to leasing on to someone, or even potentially, if things are real bad, maybe they have to switch to a company driver, or maybe that's how they prefer it. And then when things switch, they go the other way. So this really is helping to give insight into that kind of business model aspect of the freight market and what's happening for those individual segments. And unfortunately right now, what's kind of happening obviously in the freight overall, which we've just talked about, is also occurring in those sort of segments. But there are benefits obviously to different models. Leasing onto a carrier, for example, you still have your own independence in a way. You're still your own business, and you don't have the same amount of costs that you do when you're under your own authority. Now, that also means you don't have as much of a reward.
Sure.
But in a season like this, that could help mitigate some of your risk. And so I think this could be really helpful in just looking forward on, depending on where you are, and if you're someone who kind of fluctuates a little bit, this might help you in making decisions.
Yeah, the more options you have right now, the better. I think that's an understatement for sure. Andrew, we learn something every time you come by. We appreciate your time and encourage everybody to go to the OOIDA Foundation website. Check out both those reports.
Yes.
They are there right now. Andrew, thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Again, check out the OOIDA Foundation website for those reports and more information that can help you in your everyday business life. Time now for a quick break, but don't go anywhere. There's more Landline Now right around the corner.
Firestone tires are for more of everything. more miles for every tire dollar, and more confidence in your fleet. At Firestone, we help fleets save with dependable value. Find your local Firestone dealer today at firestonetire.com/dealer.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off Truckstop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2023 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
When it's time to overhaul your truck engine, help protect it by insisting on a genuine Vibratech TVD crankshaft damper. Heavy duty, absolute premium quality, and they're made right here in the USA. Find a dealer at vibratechtvd.com.
Landline Now, welcome back. Every day, truckers out on the road are running into problems and challenges that make it harder for them to do their jobs, and many of those truckers call OOIDA for help. Those truckers are more than likely to talk with OOIDA's Business Services Department. Here to discuss some of the more common problems right now are Tom Crowley and Joe Biggs of Business Services. Guys, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us on, Mark.
Good to be here, Mark.
First thing that came up was some folks that were asking what they can do if their carrier refuses to pay detention pay. And let's start with, what is detention pay?
And detention pay is pay, not historically, but what they consider, anything over 2 hours from being the shipper. That's what's agreed upon. Typically, and anything that goes beyond that, 3, 4, 5 hours, they want to be compensated for that time. So that's where the detention pay comes in, is if you're held up over those 2 hours, you can still recoup some of the loss of not being able to continue running.
So what are the circumstances in which you would get detention pay? I mean, I would assume you'd have to have that in the contract.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. When you're leased on with a carrier, everything that you do is contractual. So everything you do, all your obligations and their obligations are contractual. So, it should be based in the contract, which part of the leasing regulations stipulate compensations stated in the contract. So it should say in the contract what it is, whether it's a 2-hour minimum, what the minimum is before you can get detention pay. One of the things that I see a lot of the times is carriers put in there, we will pay detention pay if we get paid. Well, that's problematic, because are they really trying to collect from that broker, or did they just let it slide off? I've been leased to carriers over the time, and I never got my detention pay with the same settlement as I would get for the haul, but I would get the detention pay a couple of weeks or a month later, and it was after the carrier was able to collect. So it does become problematic, and enforcing detention pay is another issue. I mean, because basically, if you don't get your detention pay that you're promised, then what do? You're to the point where you got to take a carrier to court. I would say in many times, you're probably better off to find a better carrier. Find a carrier that values your time if you're not getting paid your detention.
Now, you had mentioned before we went on the air that this is more than likely a problem with the broker. Can you explain?
Well, and like I was saying, the carrier will probably pay you detention pay if they get paid from the broker. But what incentive does the broker have to go back to their customer and really raise hell and get that money for you? They don't have a lot of incentive. So, just like in so many other aspects of trucking, everything rolls downhill, and we know at the bottom of the hill sits that driver. And it's unfortunate, but that is the way it is.
Now, when you do, in those cases where people do get detention pay, is there an amount it typically runs? I mean, Joe, you had mentioned earlier that how it's typically done if it is done, but do we have a typical amount?
No, not really. What you'll usually see is maybe an hourly rate for the time you're stuck sitting there. But like he said, it depends on what they can actually collect. If they say, if we collect something, we'll give it to you, it's going to vary greatly on what they're able to collect and what you agree upon in that contract.
Yeah, and with detention pay, I mean, if you're driver only, your detention pay may be, let's say if you're lucky, $15-20 an hour, maybe. But then if you're a truck, you're an owner-operator leased on with a carrier, well, I mean, your detention pay should be significantly more. I mean, I say, when you're rolling down the highway at 60 miles an hour, what are you generating? Because that's what your pay should be per hour. Now, carriers don't want to pay that. Brokers don't want to pay that. Shippers don't want to pay that. but owner-operators should demand it.
Let's go on to another topic here, and that is broker bonds. And this is one that we've talked about before quite a bit. But for folks that maybe are just getting into working with brokers, what is the broker bond? How does that work?
The broker bond is the bond the brokers have to get in place to, work as a broker. It is there to protect the carriers and the drivers if in the event that they have a clean delivery, everything's signed, everything's good, and whatever stated duration of pay you have with the broker that's in your contract is not met, then you can go back on the broker bond to collect that payment.
Well, you can file on the broker bond now, and let me say, nothing's 100% guaranteed. I mean, the way this is supposed to work is there's a $75,000 bond in place, a financial security that the broker has to have in place. They have to have this in place with the FMCSA before they can actually get their brokerage authority. But once that's in place, if the broker doesn't pay the carrier for many different reasons, but they don't pay the carrier then goes to the FMCSA website, to the SAFER website. You look up the broker, you go to the L&I, the license and insurance section, and there you can see the bonding company. You contact the bonding company and relay to them the MC number of the broker and that you haven't been paid, and they will let you know their process for filing on their bond. So you go through their process, which is usually a copy of the rate sheet, a copy of the BOL, possibly a copy of the contract with the broker. You send that to them, and then they're supposed to do their due diligence in looking into that claim and seeing if it's a legitimate load that should be paid on. And if so, they should pay out. Is what usually happens is the bonding company contacts the broker. The broker then says, oh, well, there's a claim on that load. Well, that derails everything, because if there's a claim on the load, they may not have to pay. If there is no claim on the load and the broker just has not paid, the bonding company will inform the broker, well, if we pay out on this, there could be consequences for you. So if it's a legitimate load that the broker hasn't paid on, they'll either cough up the money or come up with a reason to say that there's a claim. The problem becomes there's no set standard or no set protocol for this. It's up to the bonding company, the broker, and the FMCSA doesn't step in to do much enforcement. So I'm not saying you can't get paid from the bonding company, but that payment, say the broker goes out of business if they file for bankruptcy or something. I mean, that payment will come months and months down the road. There will probably be many hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of freight haul that have to be divided up. So you'll take that $75,000 and divide it by however many carriers are owed money and the amount of money that they're owed, and you'll get some pro rata number of, which usually works out to pennies on the dollar. So it's not a surefire way. It's less than desirable. Let me just say that.
How do you avoid running into this problem in the first place? I mean, are there ways that you can try and protect yourself against these situations?
I would say the biggest way to protect yourself against these situations is reputable brokers that have a good reputation of paying their bills, that don't come up with arbitrary off-the-wall claims or reasons to not pay. I mean, you definitely, and on some of these message boards and social media boards out there, you can see there's a lot of discussion about different brokers and how some of them are good and pay, and some of them really hold you up, And even if you're factoring, if you got a broker that doesn't pay for, 45, 60 days or longer, I mean, even if you're factoring, your factoring company is going to get nervous. They may come back to you and want that money back sooner, or they're going to charge you a bigger percentage for that money hanging out there. So, just work with reputable brokers, or, and I say that, my feelings on brokers.
Yeah.
So, but I say reputable brokers that your buddies have hauled for, that you've hauled for, that others have hauled for, and that you can find out through social media and other ways, that they are reputable brokers and they do pay their bills.
You also want to maybe avoid brokers that are just very new to the market, right?
Yeah, Mark, that's a really good point. And in some of our other shows, we've talked a lot about the scams that go on out there, and that is one of the biggest ways to detect a brokerage scam is if they've got an authority that's a couple, 2, 3, 4 months old, be very leery of them. Because the scammers, that's exactly what they're doing is they're popping up as a new broker 3 months in the business, and you're like, well, hey, they're a new broker. I know what it's like to be new. I'll give them a shot. It may be your last shot. I mean, how many $10,000 hits can you take where you haul the load, pay for the fuel, pay all the wear and tear, spend a week on that load, and then don't get paid? Probably factored that load, got the money from your factoring company, and now your factoring company wants it back. That stuff is devastating to a small carrier.
Let's go on and talk about another small carrier topic here, and that is people that are selling or buying a DOT authority number. Let's start with the selling end of this. Why would you sell a DOT authority number?
Someone would sell if they're ready to get out of the game. But one thing you have to make clear is the DOT number is non-transferable. It is a unique identifier to the individual or to the business. The only thing that could be transferred is the MC number, the actual authority itself. And they may want to get out, or someone wants to buy it because they believe that if they get that authority, it'll be older and it has age, stuff like that. So they'll be like, okay, I'll be willing to sell. Come up on a price. Typically, just they want to get out of the industry, or they no longer want to operate their own business.
What sort of advantages do you get if you're buying someone else's MC number and buying their authority?
Well, for the buyer, obviously for the seller is, some cash in your pocket at the end of the day. But for the buyer, I mean, a lot of the times they're looking for an older authority, maybe better insurance rates, maybe an established safety score or safety rating. A lot of the time, which you got to be careful here too, because there are scams involved in just about every part of trucking. And you got to be careful because you may be selling your authority to a company or to an individual that is less than reputable. They may take your good name or your good authority and pull some shady stuff. So that's something to be leery of. But basically the biggest benefit for the buyer would be an aged authority that has probably a cheaper insurance rate that goes along with it. But also, like Joe pointed out, you will have a new DOT number. So that in itself can bring up issues. You got a newer DOT number with an older authority. Insurance companies will see that. Others that look at your authority will see that. So the benefit may not be as big as you think it would be.
How do you avoid some of those typical scams? How do you spot them in the first place?
It can be difficult. You never know what someone is trying to do, what their intentions of buying it are. Maybe they've, had a DOT number or MC number that they've kind of run into the dirt a little bit. You got to look out. You got to vet the people that you're talking to, and just try and figure out exactly what their intentions are.
And there's some of that goes along with the chameleon carrier. You hear of and see these carriers out there that they've got several businesses set up, several authorities, and they take the same trucks and drivers and switch them around from different carriers. There's a lot of shadiness that goes on there. And that's basically when you have a company that maybe doesn't have a very good safety score or has some, past negative history with the FMCSA, well, then they want to pop up as somebody new. So they'll want to buy an authority and move their trucks and their drivers over under this authority. And, there's a specific region of the country where a lot of this happens. We get calls from them on a regular basis. And when somebody says, yeah, I'm hauling for a carrier out of this specific area, I always cringe because I know how that call is going to go. So there is a lot of this that goes on. So, you do need to beware.
I don't suppose you'd mind telling us what specific area of the country it is where this is happening.
I would just be leery of carriers out of the Chicago area.
Okay. Well, guys, we've run out of time. Sure appreciate all the information.
Thanks for having us on, Mark.
Have a good day.
I've been talking with Tom Crowley and Joe Biggs of OOIDA's Business Services Department. And folks, if you need help, call them at 816-229-5791. Landline Now will be back in a moment.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline now, welcome back. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has set the stage for the second meeting of its Advisory Committee on Underride Protection. It falls under the pretense of NHTSA considering a mandate. So the stakes are high for the committee, which, when it finishes its work, will make recommendations to the agency. 2 of the now 19-member committee are representing motor carriers. OOIDA board member Doug Smith is one of them, and this is how he introduced himself at the first meeting back in May.
I'm here to represent the small businessmen who will be the ones that have to pay for any of these mandates.
For as long as the committee is meeting, Smith will be tasked with providing his fellow members some perspective about the side underrides and mandates in general. The committee is working off a set of facts at the outset of their efforts. NHTSA estimates that a side underride mandate on all trailers and all semi-trailers would save about 17 lives each year, while reaping up to $166 million in safety benefits. Meanwhile, NHTSA says the annual cost of the mandate would be up to $1.2 billion. So again, just looking at the monetary numbers for a moment, the cost is more than $1 billion, the benefits about $166 million. Smith can empathize with those who have lost loved ones in crashes involving semis. He's one of them, in fact, as Smith shared with the other members of the committee.
My own family is not a stranger to the tragedy of a death loss in an automobile accident. My mother-in-law was killed in a non-at-fault car wreck. And there's a lot of emotions on the surface in this committee, and these are decisions that need to be made objectively.
So Smith understands the concerns of safety advocates, and Smith understands where they are coming from, but his question is, at what cost? Advocates for a side underride mandate will say there is no cost or price too high to save a life, and no one would argue against that. But when you start talking livelihoods, a side underride mandate or any number of mandates, whether it be an electronic logging device or speed limiter, could very well jeopardize livelihoods. NHTSA puts that price in the neighborhood of $3,000 per trailer, and with spot rates being what they are now, that's a big chunk of change going toward another new mandate. And then there's the unforeseen costs that come with time and circumstance.
Now, every time one of these side underrides is damaged in such a manner, it's going to have to be replaced. Now, the cost of the underride, I've heard quoted here today, is $3,500 to $4,500. That's the cheap part. Maintenance is going to be the expensive part. And I'd like to go on record as saying that this committee is woefully underrepresented from the people that are in charge of paying for this mandate. There's only 2 from the trucking industry here. I'm not blind to the responsibilities that we have here as a committee, or myself in particular, to be called upon to represent all owner operators. It's a weighty responsibility. I hope I can do it well.
And there is the practicality of such a mandate as well. Side underrides by nature present a barrier that prevents automobiles from sliding under a trailer, but on an everyday basis, having underrides on a trailer presents challenges, as Smith pointed out during his remarks.
There's 162,827 public railway crossings. There's 1,160 low clearance railway crossings, according to the Federal Railway Administration. Now, I'm pretty sure that no one on this committee, other than myself, has experienced the sheer terror of being grounded on a railway crossing, where you jump out of the truck, run to the cross buck, get the 800 number there, and call in to say, this is crossing number such and such, and I am fouling the tracks. I can get myself off, but it's going to take some time. Please notify any locomotives in the area. And as you can see from my driving record of 55 years of accident-free driving in the millions of miles, this can happen to me. It's going to happen to a lot less experienced people.
The next meeting is November 15th. Topics on that agenda this time around include a review of committee guidelines, the target population for side underrides, technology advances, and hurdles to implementing a possible mandate, something NHTSA continues to consider, which places high stakes on the content of these meetings. Full coverage of the next one right here on Landline Now. We close things out today with a tip of the cap for the recent inductees of the American Trucking and Industry Leader Hall of Fame. The 2023 class of honorees was enshrined on October 25th at the American Truck Historical Society headquarters in Kansas City, Missouri. It's a list of who's who of industry leaders, right in line with the purpose of the hall. The new class includes Robert A. Young Jr., founder of ABF Freight, Ted Rogers, the first president of the American Trucking Associations, Frank Sieberling, the founder of the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, Al and Don Schneider, the founders of Schneider National, and Harry Kent and Edgar Worth, the founders of Kenworth. Speaking of Kenworth, the company is celebrating its 100th anniversary this year. Eric Krimsner, medium-duty marketing manager for the company, said it's an honor to be recognized.
We started the year out trying to figure out how are we going to celebrate 100 years, right? And the Koenig family ended up having the 75-year trailer, and that kicked it all off, and we were able to restore it and build it and bring it into the 100-year fashion. And then that started a relationship with the society, and we met hundreds, if not thousands of people all over the country, and we were able to celebrate together. And then honoring that at the end with induction into the Trucking Hall of Fame on behalf of everyone from Kenworth. We are deeply passionate about the industry and thankful that we could accept the honor. And I have met thousands of drivers this year, and that has changed my perspective of how our product is used and how the entire world goes round. And it is a great privilege to be part of that industry. And at Kenworth, we really thank all the drivers.
For David Beasley, Vice President of Commercial Tires at Goodyear, the event was a reminder of how far the company has come.
Oh, it's a great honor for us, and just what a great ceremony for our founder to go back and to be honored this way for the innovation he showed at that point in time. And just all the associates at Goodyear, past and present, are really honored by this award.
Goodyear was one of several award winners at the ceremony as well, receiving the 125-Year Company Award. Kenworth and ABF Freight each got 100-Year Company Awards, along with several other companies honored with similar milestones. Schneider's Director of New Business Development, Jonathan Bechtel, said it's the people that keep them going.
This organization is led with honesty and integrity, and these guys were pioneers. They've just done a fantastic job. Our leadership, current leadership, they're just fantastic. So we appreciate the opportunity to be recognized today.
The American Trucking and Industry Leader Hall of Fame was established in 2021 with OOIDA among its first class of inductees, along with others like the Mack brothers and radio legend Dave Nemo. At the time, we spoke with Tom Mullen, who was chair of the hall then. The mission he laid out then remains the mission today after a third class of inductees, honoring the trucking community from every angle.
The drivers are part of the Hall of Fame. Industry leaders, people will say, such as Plessy and the Mack brothers, be part of it. And then there's the support groups, OOIDA and Dave Nemo. We're going to have a section for like the truck stops. The truck stops played a part in the history of the industry.
Gratian, the executive director of ATHS, said as more people learn about the Hall of Fame, the more interest it's drawing. This week's ceremony drew in quite a lot of people, especially considering the weather.
It's working, isn't it? It is. It's really good. We just had about 70 people for lunch. We're expecting probably 100 here. The rain, unfortunately, is going to keep people away, but there's not much you can do about that. There's probably 20 trucks out there, mostly Kenworths celebrating that, but just from anybody that wants to show up and be seen.
As the Hall of Fame continues to grow, Gratian said the reaction of those being honored says it all.
Probably the best one was last year, Mr. Congdon from ODL. He actually took it on behalf of his father, and he was an older gentleman himself, and he cried. And it really was just so heartwarming to be able to recognise people in the industry and have their descendants come in and accept the awards. It really is an honour for anybody. So, yeah, it's great.
And that's our show for today. All of us at Landline Now thank you for joining us, and we look forward to bringing you more news and analysis from the trucking industry as it comes. Until next time, take care and drive safe.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
My kids.
chrome,
And I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us.
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.